Today we're going to be working on linear equation word problems. Here, for example, we have the problem stating last week Gigi spent 6 more hours practicing guitar than Will did. If Gigi practiced for 14 hours last week, which of the following can be used to calculate X, the number of hours Will practiced guitar last week? Will you acknowledge in all your answer choices rather, is that none of them really state a specific answer. When I'm trying to refer to is that they don't say X is equal to number, for example. And when that's the case, you're really trying to write out what the problem, well, I'm getting excited, what the problem would look like if it wasn't before it's solved. So it's asking you to do step one for the problem from your perspective, or you writing it out for them basically. So doing that is actually very simple, but a lot of my students struggle with this heavily. The reason that they struggle with it heavily is because they might have not been practicing it previously, where when you're given these problems, you want to write out everything as to what it's referring to. For example, what I would ask my students to do here is that Gigi spent 6 more hours practicing guitar than Will did. So you can acknowledge that the 6 obviously isn't all the answer choices, but the 6, we want to say what it is. What is the 6? What does it refer to? What is it referring to? So all it's really saying is that Gigi spent 6 more hours than Will. You're really saying that Gigi did more than Will, right? So you can state a better way. This might help you out a little bit better. So Gigi, I'm gonna write a statement. Gigi spent 6 more than Will. Oh, you're barely gonna be able to see it. So automatically, we can already acknowledge that the value for 6 is just stating more, right? It's kind of like the eating symbol, little piranha. I referred to it in a different episode. Now, the next part is we want to go ahead and acknowledge what 14 is. Gigi practiced for 14 hours last week. So we will say that our practice time, right? This is statement 2. I'm going to put it in a different color. Statement 2 is saying that spent last week is 14 plus, is plus 14 for Gigi specifically. So this is not for Will. Just be aware. We know, think about it as a friend telling you a story. If my friend is telling me a story and then they ask me to write notes about all the numbers that they are stating, you would go ahead and write that out. The next statement is which of the following can be used to calculate X, which is here the number of hours Will practiced guitar last week. So X is equal to hours, sorry for my handwriting, hours Will practiced. Okay. Now, what I want you to think about is, am I adding, subtracting, or multiplying in my problem? If you're reading the words accurately as to what is being done, it's really simple, right? So what we're trying to do is figure out, okay, can you write this into an equation? You have 3 values. You have 6, 14, and X. Remember, X is a variable that holds a value. Here, you're simply stating, okay, can you write this into a equation? Here we have 6 times X. So again, Gigi spent 6 more than Will. If I multiply 6 and X, would that give me a number that is 6 more than X? Notice the wording I'm using, because when you're saying these things out loud or when you're saying these things in your head, it does make more sense. The reason this wouldn't work is because this is a multiple. So when you're multiplying, you're not saying more in the sense of it's being added on top of it. Notice how I'm already referring to what the answer could possibly be. So when you're saying it in that format, it's not always going to be the case, but in this specific problem, you can easily tell that it is not going to be A because it's saying the word more. This is very, very, very important when it uses the word more because it's referring to what could possibly be the answer. Here, you're given x minus 6 is equal to 14. Okay, so again, let's go ahead and write that out. So if I say x, hours will practiced, okay, this is will. And then I say minus 6, okay, so whatever number, for example, to make this true, it would be 20. So will practice 20 hours and then minus 6, but you pause. Really quickly, you acknowledge if you're subtracting 6, it's weird because it's saying that Chi spent 6 more. That doesn't make sense. Why are you subtracting when you're saying that I have more of that? Notice how I'm wording it in that way that it will make more sense that if you're saying more, you're adding, which is exactly what the next answer choice is. So we can go ahead and cross out option number 2, which is B. And let's go to the last one. Again, will, right here, 20 plus 6. It's not going to be 20, actually, my bad. It's going to be will, again. We're going to say will did this. Will. And then Chi spent 6 more hours. This is the more. And then it says Chi practiced for 14 hours last week. And then this is basically saying that this is what Chi spent. Is 14 the accurate amount of what was spent? And is X still exactly what will practiced? Because we know will practice this amount, which is the X. We know Chi spent 6 more, so that's why I'm adding it. And then because I acknowledge both of them, we can say, hey, oh, well, Chi spent 14 hours studying or 14 hours practicing. That is why the answer would be C. Don't worry if you are struggling with my statement. We're going to do another one either way. Let's do the next one. The answer would be C, just to verify. Here you go. There you go. Nice work. Let's keep it going. Samir spent half as long working on his physics homework as Corey did. If Samir spent 40 minutes on his physics homework, how long did Corey spend on his physics homework? Here, my answer choices are different. The reason that they're different is that they want me to already figure out the answer. The complicated part is that the equation wasn't flat out given to me. I now have to figure that out, or I have to do that part myself. Here, what I'm going to say is Samir spent half as long working on his physics homework. This is the tricky part to a lot of people because they're looking for the numbers, they're looking for values, but here they are giving you the value. When they say the word half, I'm going to change colors here. When they're giving you the word half, that just means 1 divided, oh, you can't see, 1 divided by 2. So you're saying that I'm going to divide by 2. Hopefully that looks pretty, kind of. As long working on his physics homework as Corey did. You're basically either cutting it or you're multiplying it, depending on the statement or depending on the rest of the problem that we're reading out. If Samir spent 40 minutes on his physics homework, how long did Corey spend on his physics homework? So where the confusing part to a lot of my students is also thinking, what is the problem going to be, or what exactly is the answer going to be, rather? The answer is Corey. Here, what we're looking for is my answer will be Corey's time spent on his homework. I'm going to say HW. Hopefully that makes sense. That is my answer. That is what my answer is going to look like. Here, then I have to figure out, okay, how do I write that out? Let's say Corey is simply going to be C. Let's simply say Corey is going to be C. Can't really see it. Let's say different color. Blue. C. We're going to say Corey is blue. And then if Samir spent 40 minutes on his physics homework, okay, that's our next number. Let's go ahead and say, I don't like using green when I haven't gotten to the answer. Let's say red, slight red. 40 minutes. So Samir is equal to 40. There's not much more to write about it because they're just saying, hey, Samir spent 40 minutes on his physics homework, and we can acknowledge that. 40 minutes is Samir. Corey, we don't know. All we know is that Corey is equal to C. That's all we know. Samir spent half as long working on his physics homework as Corey did. Okay? So then you can acknowledge that your answer is actually going to be, what color do we want it? Mustard? I want mustard. Oh, it's going to be really hard to see. Let's do, what about purple? Purple might work for me. Okay. So let's say then we have 40. Again, Samir spent half as long working. That is my other value. So if f equals to 40, okay, right? And then we have Corey is here, which is C. What am I going to do here at this final point? If Samir spent 40 minutes on his physics homework, okay, Samir spent half as long. Samir spent half, right? Again, he spent half as long working on his physics homework as Corey did. Half. Hopefully you already thought it out. Yes, you are indeed simply going to divide by 2. Let's go ahead and solve this out really quickly. It's going to be a very, very, very simple solution here. All you got to do, I like the little red, different color, is split it, multiply both sides by 2. I'm simply doing the inverse of both. I can cross this out. And then my answer, 40 times 2, would simply be 80. Corey spent 80 minutes studying because Samir spent only 40. And my homie over here spent half as long, or twice as long, rather. So let's go ahead and check our answer. Let's make sure we got it right. Yeah, we got it. And it even says half of 80 minutes is 40 minutes, which is the amount of Samir spent on his physics homework. Let's do one more. Marisol burned 670 calories while exercising on Monday. If Ling burned X fewer calories while exercising than Marisol did, which of the following represents the number of calories Ling burned while exercising? Okay, tricky, but we can go ahead and do this. Again, we're going to notice that it has varied. These are not equations, these are expressions. But it wants us to figure out how would you write it out in numbers, in a statement, an expression, instead of saying it in words, writing out a paragraph kind of thing. How would you write that out? That's all we're trying to figure out here. Marisol burned 670 calories while exercising on Monday. So 670 is referring to, or is 600 calories Marisol burned. Usually what I also recommend people, if you're struggling with these topics, is trying to summarize it as short as possible. Try to use as least words as possible. I know I've been writing a little bit more for my other ones, but for here, I would recommend you always try to write as little as possible about that number, so that when you refer to that number in these because these are very simple questions, try to use as least words as possible because it makes it easier for you to understand what this number is referring to. Because every number that we say in the real world, we're talking about things that we have. For example, I have one phone, I have one computer. The one in each statement is different. So here, the number 670 is only referring to this thing. Marisol burned, and then the calories, right? But I don't want to write too much. Moving on. If Ling burned X fewer calories, so if we burned X fewer calories, we're going to say in blue, X is equal to what? So X is Ling less calories. It's basically referring to saying that there's a Ling burned less calories than Marisol did, because it uses the word fewer. This is the one specific thing that you have to see in this problem. Fewer calories. When it states fewer, you're instantly acknowledging that it's going to be less. It's going to either be a division problem, it's going to be a subtraction problem based on how it wants us to interpret it. Generally, though, the word fewer is going to be subtraction, generally. While exercising, then Marisol did, which of the following represents the number of calories Ling burned while exercising? Okay, so we have to acknowledge that these are two different people that are being compared to. The reason that division does not work is because it's not referring to a group of people. You're not trying to find an average of groups of people of how many calories was spent. Here, you're simply trying to figure out which one is fewer. The answer would be B. This word alone gives you the answer to your question. It gives you the answer to the whole thing if you simply read that one word. And it's very simple for a lot of people to skim through these problems and be able to acknowledge, oh, they use the word fewer. They use the word less, which is, well, less is a synonym to fewer. So acknowledge that and be aware that when you have problems like that, sometimes it's just going to be very, very, very simple. Other times it's going to be complicated. You just have to take your time, read the question, and acknowledge what it is that it's asking you. Thank you for watching.